A suspicious millionaire decides to install hidden cameras to monitor the new employee who captivates his son. What begins as a simple act of precaution turns into an obsession with her every gesture and smile. But amidst the recordings, he uncovers something that shatters everything he believed about his own son. The truth behind the images is so unexpected that it transforms guilt, fear, and love into a single revelation. The afternoon lazily settled over the gardens of Aldridge Manor, in the luxurious gated community of Northwood in London. Raphael Aldridge watched the security guard's movements on the monitors in his office. At 45, the pharmaceutical magnate had built a billion-dollar empire, but his permanently tense expression revealed that money did not bring the peace he so longed for. Raphael adjusted his navy blue tie and checked his watch. The new nanny would arrive in 15 minutes. She would be the fifth in less than 6 months. None could handle little Gabriel, just 2 years old, who remained withdrawn in his own world since his mother Louisa's disappearance 2 years prior. The car accident had taken his wife and transformed his son into a silent child who rarely showed emotions. The intercom rang. Raphael frowned. Punctuality was not common in his experiences with employees. "Mr. Aldridge, the nanny candidate has just arrived," announced Sylvia, the housekeeper. "You can leave her in the living room. I'll be down in a moment." Raphael took a deep breath, preparing for another interview that would likely end in failure. Most candidates were intimidated by his direct manner and rigorous demands. Others were more enchanted by his wealth than by Gabriel's well-being. In business, he had learned the hard way that friendly smiles often hid dubious intentions. He descended the Italian marble stairs with deliberately slow steps. When he entered the room, he found a woman of approximately 30 years old, wearing a simple but elegant red dress, her black hair tied back in a low bun. She was observing Gabriel's photo on the coffee table with genuine interest. "Good afternoon," Raphael said in a cold voice. The woman turned with a slight start, but quickly composed herself, smiling. "Good afternoon. Mr. Aldridge, I'm Beatrice Olson." Raphael noticed that she did not extend her hand, respecting personal space. A small positive point. "Miss Olson, I have some very direct questions. I don't like to waste time." "Certainly. I'm at your disposal," she replied, maintaining a serene posture that strangely irritated him. It was too easy to feign tranquility for a few minutes. "I see you worked in a daycare in Edinburgh for 5 years, and then in a care home. Why did you leave those jobs?" "The daycare where I worked closed due to the pandemic. As for the care home, I was there for 2 years. But I needed a better salary to help my mother with her medical treatment." Raphael nodded, mentally noting that he would meticulously verify this information. "And what brings you to London, specifically for this position?" Beatrice hesitated for a moment, and her smile subtly diminished. "To be honest, Mr. Aldridge, I saw the advertisement and something caught my attention. The description mentioned a boy who needed special care, who doesn't communicate much. I have experience with children like that, and I feel I can help." Raphael narrowed his eyes. The answer sounded rehearsed, as if she knew exactly what to say to get the job. Many nannies thought they could help Gabriel. None succeeded. "I understand. Every child is unique, and I'm not promising miracles," Beatrice replied, meeting his gaze. "Just the opportunity to try." Raphael stood up abruptly. "Let's meet Gabriel. He's the one who decides in the end." He led Beatrice through the corridors decorated with valuable artworks until they reached the boy's room. The environment was spacious, with walls in soft blue tones and carefully organized toys, many still in their original packaging, never touched. Gabriel was sitting on the rug, mechanically assembling a simple puzzle. His brown eyes, identical to his mother's, remained fixed and distant. "Gabriel," Raphael called. The boy did not react as expected. Beatrice slowly approached and sat on the rug, at a respectful distance from the child. She did not speak immediately, just observed the puzzle. "You're almost finished," she finally commented in a soft voice. "Just 2 pieces left. Can I help?" Gabriel remained focused on his task, ignoring her completely. Raphael crossed his arms, already anticipating another failure. But then Beatrice did something unexpected. She began to softly sing a nursery rhyme, while picking up another puzzle and assembling it parallel to Gabriel's. Her voice was melodious, almost hypnotic. Raphael realized the song was old, one his own mother used to sing when he was a child. After a few minutes, Gabriel slowly lifted his eyes. His gaze landed first on Beatrice's hands, then on her face. The nanny smiled and continued singing without forcing contact. "Look, I finished mine," she said after fitting the last piece. "Yours is prettier." To Raphael's absolute astonishment, Gabriel slid his finished puzzle towards Beatrice, as if offering it for her to see better. It was the first spontaneous gesture of interaction Raphael had witnessed in months. "That's a very cool race car," Beatrice commented, smiling. "Do you like cars?" Gabriel did not respond verbally, but his eyes remained fixed on her for longer than usual with strangers. Raphael felt something strange in his chest, a mixture of hope and alarm. The ease with which Beatrice had captured his son's attention was unsettling. "Gabriel needs to rest now," he interrupted abruptly. "We can continue the interview in the office." On the way back, Raphael tried to process what he had witnessed. Gabriel's behavior had been unusual, almost suspicious. How had Beatrice achieved this result so quickly? There was something about her that triggered all his alert instincts, the same ones that had saved him from countless scams in the business world. "How did you know which song to sing?" he questioned as soon as he closed the office door. "It's a popular song," Beatrice replied simply. "Many children respond well to familiar melodies." "And the puzzles? How did you know he would be assembling one?" "I didn't know. I just observed what he was doing and joined the activity without invading his space. It's a basic technique for introverted children." The answers were reasonable, but Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. Beatrice seemed to know exactly how to approach Gabriel, as if she had known him for a long time. "Mr. Aldridge," Beatrice said after a moment of silence, "I understand your concern. A vigilant father must question everything when it comes to his child's well-being. If you prefer, I can provide more references or start with a trial period." Raphael studied the woman's face. Her eyes were sincere, but that meant little. He had known people capable of lying while looking directly into his eyes. 1 week, he finally decided, starting tomorrow. Full-time with Sundays off. Sylvia will show you the nanny's room and explain the house rules. "Thank you for the opportunity," Beatrice replied, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. For a brief instant, Raphael glimpsed something. Concern, fear, behind that serene expression. This only intensified his suspicion. After Beatrice left, Raphael immediately called his private investigator. "Paul, I need a full background check." Beatrice Olson, about 30 years old, worked in a daycare in Edinburgh and in a care home. "I want everything. Background, relationships, debts, social media. Especially if there's any connection to my family or companies." He hung up and stood watching the garden through the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the perfectly manicured lawn. Somewhere in the manor, Gabriel continued in his silent world. Raphael would not allow anyone to approach his son with ulterior motives. He had already lost Louisa. He would not lose Gabriel too. That night, as he walked the silent corridors of the manor before retiring, Raphael stopped in front of his son's room. The bedside lamp was on, casting soft shadows on the wall. Gabriel slept peacefully, hugging the teddy bear he rarely let go of, a gift from Louisa. A feeling of emptiness hit him like a punch to the stomach. 2 years had passed, and he still couldn't enter that room without feeling the weight of his wife's absence. How would Louisa know what to do with Gabriel? How to help him out of that isolation? She had always had a natural instinct to understand their son, even before he could speak. Raphael gently closed the door and went to his room. The next day, Beatrice would start work, and he would need to be alert. Something about her bothered him deeply. Perhaps the quiet confidence, so different from the nervousness of the other candidates, or the way she looked at Gabriel, as if she already knew him. As he lay down in his king-size bed, too lonely for one person, Raphael made a decision. Paul's investigation wouldn't be enough. He would need to watch Beatrice personally, observe her every move, every word. If she was plotting something, he would find out. The clock struck almost midnight when Raphael finally fell asleep, but his rest was restless, populated by confused dreams where Beatrice sang to Gabriel while wearing Louisa's wedding dress. The next morning, at 6 o'clock, Raphael was already in his office, reviewing documents for a new pharmaceutical acquisition. Work had always been his refuge, the place where he maintained absolute control. At 7:30, He heard movements. Downstairs, Beatrice had arrived punctually. Through the office window he watched as Sylvia led her through the garden, showing her the limits of the property where Gabriel could play. Beatrice wore a simple red dress, different from the day before but in the same vibrant shade. Raphael noticed how she paid attention to every detail, asking occasional questions. Her posture was professional, but there was something more in her eyes when she looked at the house. A mixture of admiration and nostalgia? The day had only just begun, but Raphael already knew he wouldn't be able to concentrate on work. Not with a stranger caring for his son, not with that persistent feeling that Beatrice Olsen was hiding something important behind her gentle smile. 3 days had passed since Beatrice's arrival at Aldridge Manor. Raphael had reorganized his schedule to work from home, something his partners found strange, but which he justified as a need to be closer to his son. The truth was, he couldn't concentrate thinking about what might happen in his absence. That Thursday morning, Raphael discreetly observed through the half-open door of the conservatory. Beatrice was sitting on the rug with Gabriel, showing him an animal book. To his surprise, the boy seemed genuinely interested, occasionally pointing to the colorful figures. "That's right, Gabriel. This is the toucan. It has a huge colorful beak, see?" Beatrice said in an animated but not overly childish voice. "It lives in the Amazon rainforests. One day, who knows, we might visit a zoo to see a real one." Gabriel clapped his little hands on the book, a gesture Raphael rarely saw. The preliminary report from Paul, his investigator, had arrived the night before, confirming Beatrice's work history at the mentioned institutions. Her references were impeccable, perhaps too impeccable, Raphael thought. Information about her family and possible suspicious connections was still missing. It was then that something happened that Raphael was not prepared to see. Gabriel, his silent and withdrawn son, let out a laugh. A genuine crystalline laugh upon seeing Beatrice imitate the sound of a monkey. The sound caught Raphael so off guard that he almost dropped the coffee cup he was holding. He hadn't heard that laugh since before the accident that took Louisa. "You liked the monkey, didn't you?" Beatrice smiled, making the sound and gestures again. Gabriel giggled even louder, his little eyes shining in a way Raphael had forgotten was possible. Raphael retreated to the corridor, a confused mix of emotions overwhelming him. He should have been happy to see his son finally showing joy, but something deeply bothered him. Why did Gabriel respond so well to Beatrice? What was so special about her that the other nannies didn't have? And why did it disturb him so much? During lunch, Raphael observed how Beatrice managed, with no apparent effort, to make Gabriel eat his entire meal, something that usually required almost an hour of frustrated attempts. "He seems to like you," Raphael commented, trying to sound casual as he cut a piece of grilled chicken. "Gabriel is a wonderful child," Beatrice replied with a gentle smile. "He just needs time and space to express himself in his own way. In previous interviews, I mentioned that he lost his mother 2 years ago. Since then, he rarely shows emotions. Losses are difficult for all of us, but especially for children so young," Beatrice said, looking at Gabriel with affection. "They don't have the words to express the pain, so they withdraw. But joy is there, waiting to be rediscovered." There was something in the way she spoke that made Raphael uneasy. She seemed to speak from personal experience, not just theoretical knowledge. "Have you experienced any significant loss, Miss Olsen?" he asked directly. Beatrice's eyes briefly darted to the window, as if searching for something on the horizon. "We all lose important people at some point in our lives," she replied vaguely. Raphael noticed that she did not answer his question directly, which only increased his suspicion. He decided to change tactics. "I noticed you always wear red. Any special reason?" Beatrice smiled, seeming more relaxed with the change of subject. "Children respond well to vibrant colors. Red captures attention, stimulates curiosity. Besides, my mother always said that red wards off negative energies." "Interesting theory," Raphael commented, hiding his skepticism. After lunch, while Gabriel took his nap and Beatrice organized toys in his room, Raphael locked himself in the office and called Paul again. "I need more information about Beatrice Olsen. Focus on her family, especially her mother. I'll check for any connection to my family or Louisa's family." He hung up, pensive. The ease with which Beatrice had won over Gabriel in just 3 days was disconcerting. The boy smiled, interacted, and even giggled in her presence. Raphael should have been relieved, but years of betrayals in the corporate world had taught him to doubt seemingly perfect situations. That afternoon, he made a decision. After Gabriel and Beatrice went out to play in the garden, he called his chief of security, Mark. "I want additional surveillance cameras installed. In the living room, Gabriel's room, the kitchen, and the garden. I want to monitor all movements inside this house." "Any specific problem, sir?" Mark asked, surprised by the sudden request. "Just a precaution. And this stays between us. No one else should know, especially the new nanny." Mark nodded and left to make the necessary arrangements. Raphael knew he was crossing a line, invading an employee's privacy, but he convinced himself it was for Gabriel's sake. He needed to be sure who Beatrice Olsen really was. The cameras were discreetly installed the next day, while Beatrice took Gabriel for a walk through the property's gardens. Raphael now had access to images from practically every room in the house on a monitor in his office. The first days of surveillance revealed nothing alarming. Beatrice was meticulous in her care for Gabriel, patient during meals, creative in playtime, and gentle when putting him to sleep. She sang to him every night, always traditional nursery rhymes, and told stories that Raphael recognized from his own childhood. What most disturbed Raphael, however, was Gabriel's transformation. The boy who previously spent hours in absolute silence now babbled in his own child's language, showed toys to Beatrice, and most surprisingly, constantly giggled in her presence. It was as if a switch had been flipped, bringing back the vibrant child who had disappeared along with Louisa. A week after the cameras were installed, Raphael was receiving another report from Paul when he heard something that made him freeze. Through the monitor, he caught the crystalline sound of Gabriel's laughter echoing through the corridor, followed by hurried footsteps. Instinctively, he turned up the volume and watched the scene unfolding in the living room. Beatrice was chasing Gabriel in a game of tag, both laughing. The boy stumbled slightly on the rug and fell to a seated position, but instead of crying as he normally would, he looked at Beatrice and giggled even more. The nanny sat beside him on the floor, laughing too. "You're so clever, Gabriel. You almost got away from me," she said, affectionately adjusting his hair. It was then that Raphael heard what truly alarmed him. "Grandpa Anthony would have loved to see you like this. So happy and mischievous," Beatrice murmured, apparently unaware that she had said it aloud. Raphael felt his blood run cold. How did she know his father's name? Anthony Aldridge had passed away almost 20 years ago, long before Beatrice was old enough to know him. And why would she mention his father to Gabriel? What kind of game was she playing? He abruptly turned off the monitor and tried to calm down. Maybe he had misheard. Or maybe Beatrice had researched his family, which would be invasive but not necessarily sinister. Big businessmen like him often had their family lives exposed in old news reports. That night during dinner, Raphael decided to test his nanny. "Gabriel seems more and more comfortable with you," he commented casually while watching his son play with his food, something he now did with joy, not apathy. "He's an incredible child," Beatrice replied with her usual gentle smile. "He's just rediscovering how to express himself. You know, he reminds me a lot of my father sometimes. The same determined look." Raphael keenly observed Beatrice's reaction. She seemed to freeze for an almost imperceptible instant before responding. Family resemblances are fascinating, aren't they? Genes have a curious way of expressing themselves through generations. The answer was neutral, too calculated. Raphael was sure now. She knew something about his father, something she wasn't telling. "My father was a businessman like me. Anthony Aldridge. He passed away many years ago." As he mentioned the name, Raphael saw it. Beatrice swallowed hard and her fingers lightly squeezed the napkin. It was a minimal gesture, but for someone trained to detect lies in business meetings, it was like an alarm sounding. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, quickly regaining her composure. "It must have been difficult." "It was a long time ago," Raphael replied, keeping his eyes fixed on her. "I was young, still in college." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sounds Gabriel made as he ate. Raphael noticed that Beatrice avoided his gaze now, concentrating on the boy. Later that night, after Beatrice had retired to her room, Raphael returned to the office and began reviewing the recordings of the past few days, looking for any... hint of suspicious behavior. He watched her every move with Gabriel, every expression, every word. It was then that he noticed something hanging around her neck, a locket that usually remained hidden under her dress, but which occasionally appeared when she bent down to pick up Gabriel or retrieve a toy. He couldn't clearly see the design, but something about that object sparked a distant memory. Raphael zoomed in on the image, trying to better distinguish the locket. It was a simple circle with something in the center. It looked like a small star. Raphael's heart raced. His father used to wear a pocket watch with an identical symbol, a circle with a star in the center, the emblem of the old family company before the restructurings Raphael implemented after taking over the business. How could Beatrice have a locket with his father's company symbol? The coincidence was too absurd to ignore. Raphael felt his breathing quicken as a theory began to form in his mind. Perhaps Beatrice was the daughter of some old employee who harbored a grudge. Perhaps she was part of an elaborate scheme to infiltrate his life and gain some kind of revenge or financial advantage. But that didn't explain the almost supernatural connection she had established with Gabriel. The boy, who rejected any approach, had completely opened up to Beatrice in a matter of days. Raphael ran a hand over his face, feeling exhausted and confused. He needed to find out who Beatrice Olsen really was and what she wanted with his family. Tomorrow, he would confront Paul with this new information and demand an even more thorough investigation. He was about to turn off the monitor when he saw Beatrice silently leaving her room. It was almost 2 in the morning. Raphael straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. Where was she going at that hour? He quickly switched to the corridor camera and saw Beatrice walking slowly towards Gabriel's room. She was wearing a bathrobe over her nightgown, her hair loose over her shoulders. Her face had an expression Raphael couldn't decipher, a mixture of concern and determination. Raphael tensed, his finger hovering over the alarm button that would alert security. What was she planning to do in his son's room in the middle of the night? Beatrice gently opened Gabriel's bedroom door and entered. Raphael immediately switched to the internal camera. He watched as she approached the crib, observing the boy sleep for a few moments. Then, to his astonishment, Beatrice knelt beside the crib as if praying. "I promised I'd take care of you, little one," she whispered, so softly that Raphael could barely hear, "and I'll keep that promise, no matter what happens." A tear ran down Beatrice's face as she delicately adjusted Gabriel's blanket. The locket had slipped out from inside her bathrobe and swung gently, reflecting the faint light of the bedside lamp. There was no doubt now. It was the same symbol as his father's watch. Raphael couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The image of Beatrice kneeling beside Gabriel's crib, silently crying while whispering promises, tormented him. By dawn, he was exhausted, his eyes burning from lack of sleep, but with a renewed determination to discover the truth about the mysterious nanny who had entered his family's life so easily. During breakfast, he observed Beatrice carefully. She seemed normal, helping Gabriel with his fruit cereal, smiling and talking to him as if nothing had happened during the night. There were no signs of the emotionally distraught woman he had seen on the cameras. "Did you sleep well, Miss Olsen?" Raphael asked casually, pouring himself coffee. "Very well, thank you," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Raphael noticed the slight dark circles she tried to conceal. "That's good. I had a restless night. Sometimes I feel like I hear footsteps in the corridors during the early hours." Beatrice froze for an almost imperceptible instant before returning to help Gabriel with his spoon. "Large houses like this often make strange noises at night," she commented, keeping her eyes fixed on the boy. "The wood expands and contracts with temperature changes." "Certainly," Raphael agreed, noticing how skillfully she avoided the subject. "By the way, I noticed you wear an interesting locket. It looks old." This time the reaction was unequivocal. Beatrice instinctively brought her hand to her chest, where the locket was hidden under her red dress. "It's a family keepsake," she replied after a pause, too brief to be natural. Raphael leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on her. "May I see it? I'm an admirer of antique jewelry." Beatrice's hesitation was visible. For a moment, Raphael thought she would refuse, which would only confirm his suspicions. But then, slowly, she pulled out the thin silver chain, revealing the locket that had been hidden. It was exactly as Raphael suspected, a silver circle with a small five-pointed star in the center, the symbol his family had used for generations before he modernized the company's brand after taking control. "Very beautiful," he commented, trying to keep his voice neutral as his heart raced. "It looks like an emblem my family used many years ago." "Curious, isn't it?" "The world is full of coincidences," Beatrice replied, quickly tucking the locket back under her dress. "Gabriel, shall we finish your breakfast? Then we can read that story about the alligator you liked yesterday." Gabriel clapped his little hands on the table, excited, effectively ending the locket discussion. Raphael noticed the tactic, but decided not to press the issue. He needed more information before confronting her directly. As soon as he finished breakfast, he retreated to his office and called Paul. "I need results today," he demanded without preamble. "I want to know everything about Beatrice Olsen's past, especially any possible connection to my family. And there's something else. She wears a locket with the old Aldridge Industries symbol. Find out how she obtained it." While waiting for news, Raphael dedicated himself to his own research. He scoured the company's digitized archives, looking for any mention of the Olsen name among former employees. Nothing significant came up. Then he reviewed old photo albums, searching for faces that might resemble Beatrice, some relative who could explain her familiarity with the Aldridge family. Hours later, while checking the surveillance cameras on his tablet, Raphael observed Beatrice and Gabriel in the garden. She had spread a blanket under a leafy tree and was showing Gabriel how to make soap bubbles. The boy jumped and tried to pop them, laughing in that carefree way that had become common in her presence. "Look how fast you are," Beatrice exclaimed, blowing more bubbles into the wind. "Just like your grandfather when he got excited about something." Raphael froze. Again that reference to his father. There was no denying it anymore. Beatrice knew Anthony Aldridge somehow. But how? She appeared to be no more than 30, which meant she would have been just a child when his father passed away. The afternoon was advancing when the phone finally rang. It was Paul. "I have preliminary information, Mr. Aldridge. Miss Olsen has a clean record, as we've already confirmed. Born in Edinburgh, daughter of Mary Olsen, a retired nurse. The father is unknown, not on record. She graduated in pedagogy, specializing in early childhood education. No criminal records, significant debts, or suspicious behavior. What about the locket? Any connection to my family?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's the interesting part. Mary Olsen, her mother, worked at St. Luke's Hospital in London for almost 30 years. And guess who was admitted? There in his last months of life? Raphael felt a chill run down his spine. "My father." Exactly. Anthony Aldridge was a patient at St. Luke's for the 3 months preceding his passing. And according to the records I managed to access, Mary Olsen was one of the nurses assigned to care for him. The revelation hit Raphael like a punch. His father, always reserved about his health problems, had spent his last months in a hospital under the care of Beatrice's mother. It was the connection he was looking for, but it still left many questions unanswered. "There's something else you should know," Paul continued. "Mary Olsen frequently took her young daughter to the hospital during her shifts. Apparently the hospital had a more flexible policy at the time, and since she was a single mother, sometimes she had no one to leave the girl with." "Are you telling me Beatrice met my father when she was a child?" "It's possible. Records show Mary Olsen worked mainly the night shift, when visitors were rare. A lonely man and a small child in the same environment night after night. It wouldn't be surprising if they developed some kind of relationship." Raphael hung up the phone, feeling stunned. The idea of his father, a notoriously cold and calculating man in business, developing affection for a child seemed absurd. Anthony Aldridge had been a distant father to him, always more concerned with company profits than with family moments. Still, people change when facing the end. Raphael knew that. Perhaps in his final days, his father found comfort in the innocence of a little girl who didn't judge him for his empire or his life choices. But that didn't explain why Beatrice had approached Gabriel now, so many years later. What was her true objective? And what did that whispered promise in the middle of the night mean? He decided to observe her even more closely. During dinner, he noticed how Beatrice occasionally touched the locket over her dress, an almost unconscious gesture that seemed to give her security. He also noticed how she looked at Gabriel with a tenderness that went beyond the professional relationship between nanny and child. "How is your mother, Miss Olsen?" Raphael asked suddenly, keenly observing her reaction. Beatrice seemed momentarily confused by the unexpected question, but quickly recovered. "She's fine, thank you for asking. She retired a few years ago. She worked as a nurse, didn't she?" Beatrice's eyes narrowed slightly, and Raphael knew she was beginning to realize he was investigating her past. "Yes, for many years." "How did you know?" Raphael shrugged, feigning casualness. "You mentioned something about childcare when we spoke. I assumed you might come from a family involved in healthcare." It was a transparent lie, and they both knew it. A tense silence settled between them, broken only by the joyful sounds Gabriel made as he played with his food. "You know, Miss Olsen, I believe in transparency. If there's anything you'd like to tell me about your history, or your interest in working specifically with my son, this would be a good time." Beatrice maintained a steady gaze, but Raphael noticed how her fingers lightly squeezed the napkin, the same revealing gesture of tension he had observed before. "There's nothing beyond what I've already told you. Mr. Aldridge, I am a dedicated professional who genuinely cares about children's well-being." Raphael nodded slowly, knowing she was lying. He wouldn't press her now, but the message was given. He was watching, investigating, and wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. That night, after putting Gabriel to sleep, Beatrice asked permission to use the house phone. Raphael, observing through the security monitors, saw her dial a number and speak in a low voice. "Mother? It's me. Yes, everything's fine, but I think he's suspicious. He asked questions about you today, about your work as a nurse." A pause. "No, I didn't mention anything about the locket or the rest. But I don't know how long I can keep up appearances. He's very observant." Another longer pause, during which Beatrice seemed to listen intently. "I know I promised, but I didn't imagine it would be so difficult." "The boy? He's exactly as you described. Sometimes I look at him and I almost can't—" Her voice faltered. "I have to go now. I'll call you in a few days. I love you too." Raphael felt his heart race as he watched Beatrice wipe away a tear before replacing the phone. The conversation confirmed his suspicions that something much bigger was going on. Some secret involving not only Beatrice and her mother, but also his father and, more disturbingly, his son. In the following days, Raphael intensified his surveillance, analyzing every recording, every interaction between Beatrice and Gabriel. Her behavior with the boy remained impeccable. Patient, loving, dedicated. Gabriel flourished under her care, becoming more expressive and happy each day. But there were revealing moments, occasions when, thinking she was alone with Gabriel, Beatrice said things that didn't make sense for a simple nanny. "Your grandmother would be so proud to see how strong and smart you're growing," she murmured one afternoon, while helping Gabriel build a block tower. Or when during a storm she calmed the frightened boy by saying, "Don't worry, little one. Storms always pass and the sun shines again. Your grandfather taught me that when I was about your age." Raphael felt increasingly disturbed. The constant references to his parents, the locket with the family symbol, the miraculous transformation in Gabriel, everything pointed to a deep connection that went beyond what Beatrice admitted. A week after the phone call, Paul brought more information. "I managed to access Mary Olsen's nursing journal during the period your father was hospitalized," he reported. "There are several notes about the interaction between her daughter and Mr. Aldridge. Apparently, your daughter Beatrice, who was about 5 years old at the time, frequently read stories to your father during the long nights at the hospital." "My father allowed a child to read to him?" Raphael asked, incredulous. "From what is recorded, yes. In fact, there's an observation here stating that Mr. Aldridge specifically asked for the girl's presence, claiming she helped him sleep better. The image was difficult to reconcile with the cold and calculating man Raphael had known. Anthony Aldridge, the ruthless businessman who built a pharmaceutical empire without caring how many competitors he ruined in the process, finding comfort in children's stories told by a 5-year-old girl. "There's one more thing," Paul continued. "In the last week of your father's life, there's a curious entry. Mary Olson noted that Mr. Aldridge gave something to Beatrice, a gift he insisted she should keep forever, as a symbol of protection." Raphael felt a chill. The locket. Probably. The description isn't specific, but considering the star symbol was your father's personal emblem before becoming the company's brand, it makes sense. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the central element was still missing. Why had Beatrice specifically sought the position of nanny for Gabriel? What did she really want? That night, Raphael decided to confront her directly about the locket. After dinner, when Gabriel had already been put to bed, he called her to his office. "Miss Olson, I'd like to talk about something important." Beatrice sat before him, her hands clasped in her lap, her posture tense. She seemed to sense that the moment of truth had arrived. "I want you to tell me about this locket," Raphael said, placing an enlarged photograph of the object he had captured through the security cameras on the table, and more specifically about how it came into your possession. Beatrice looked at the photograph, then at Raphael. Her eyes revealed an internal battle, the desire to continue concealing the truth against the weight of carrying a secret for so long. "It was a gift," she finally replied, her voice almost a whisper. "From whom?" She took a deep breath before answering. "From your father, Mr. Aldridge, from Anthony Aldridge." A heavy silence filled the office. Raphael stared at Beatrice, his mind processing the confirmation he had just received. Even though he had already suspected the locket's origin, hearing the truth from her lips had an impact he hadn't expected. "So you knew him," he finally said, keeping his voice controlled despite the storm of emotions he felt. Beatrice nodded, her fingers instinctively tracing the outline of the locket under her dress. "My mother was a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital. She cared for your father during his last months. I was little at the time, about 5, and sometimes I had to stay at the hospital after school, waiting for her shift to end." Raphael leaned back in his chair, trying to visualize the scene, his father always so reserved and intimidating, interacting with a small child in a hospital room. "And how did you end up meeting my father?" A small smile appeared on Beatrice's lips, briefly lighting her eyes with the memory. "It was by chance. One night, I slipped out of the nurse's lounge and started exploring the corridors. I entered the wrong room, his room. He was awake, looking out the window. He wasn't annoyed by the intrusion. He just asked me if I knew how to read." "And you did?" Raphael asked, surprised by the turn of the story. "A little. I was learning in school. Your father had some children's books in the room, gifts he said he had bought for a grandson who never came to visit him." Raphael felt a pang of guilt. At the time, he was establishing his own career, trying to step out of his father's shadow. He visited the hospital only out of obligation once a week, never bringing his newborn son, Gabriel, whom Anthony barely knew. "He asked me to read to him," Beatrice continued. "He said his eyes were too tired for the small print. That was the beginning of a routine. 3 or 4 nights a week I read stories to him. My mother allowed it, saying it was good for the lonely old gentleman, as she called him." Raphael tried to reconcile this image of a gentle, lonely man with the authoritarian father he had known, the man who had mercilessly pressured him to follow in his footsteps in business, who criticized every divergent decision, who rarely showed affection. "And the locket?" he asked, returning to the central point. Beatrice's eyes moistened slightly. "In the last week he was already very weak. One night he called me close and gave me the locket. He said it was a special family symbol, representing protection and continuity. He said I should keep it always, that it would keep me safe." She paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. "He said I reminded him of how life could have been different if he had made other choices." Raphael felt something tighten in his chest. His father, always so practical and devoid of sentimentality, giving a family heirloom to a strange child on his hospital bed? The man he had known would never do that. "Why did you never mention this during the job interview? Why hide this connection?" Beatrice briefly averted her gaze. "I thought it would seem strange, that you might think I was using an old connection to get the job, or worse, that I had ulterior motives. I wanted to be judged solely on my professional qualifications." The explanation was reasonable, but Raphael felt he still wasn't getting the whole story. Something still didn't fit. And why specifically seek this job? Of all the nanny positions in London, why my house? Beatrice hesitated, her fingers now visibly clasped in her lap. Coincidence, I believe. I saw the advertisement and the Aldridge name. Caught my attention. I thought it might be a sign, an opportunity to repay in some way the kindness your father showed me as a child. Raphael keenly observed every micro-expression on her face. Beatrice was good at maintaining composure, but her eyes revealed that there was more to this story than she admitted. And what about the things you say to Gabriel? I've heard you mention my father to him. Make comparisons, talk about how similar they are. Why? Beatrice's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise at realizing she had been observed in moments she believed were private. You've been watching me, she asked in a low voice. Answer the question. Miss Olsen. Beatrice took a deep breath, regaining her composure. When I look at Gabriel, I sometimes see similarities to your father, not physically, perhaps, but in small gestures, in the way he frowns when he's concentrating. They are innocent observations, nothing more. Raphael leaned back in his chair, analyzing her. It was clear that Beatrice was hiding something, but it was also evident that her affection for Gabriel was genuine. Whatever her secret, it didn't seem to pose a direct threat to the boy's well-being. On the contrary, Gabriel had never been as happy and expressive as in recent weeks. You may go now, he finally said. But this conversation is not over, Miss Olsen. I expect total honesty next time. Beatrice nodded and stood up, visibly relieved to be dismissed. At the door, she turned briefly. Your father was a complex man, Mr. Aldridge. In his last days, he spoke a lot about regrets and second chances. Perhaps we all deserve one. With those enigmatic words, she left, leaving Raphael immersed in thought. What could his father have done that required a second chance? What regrets weighed so heavily that he sought comfort in the company of a strange child in his final moments? The next morning, Raphael woke up determined to find out more about his father's last days. While Beatrice and Gabriel played in the garden, always under the watchful eye of the cameras, he made a call he had been postponing. Dr. Evans? Raphael Aldridge. I need to talk about my father. Yes, I know it was a long time ago, but important questions have arisen. Can we meet today? Hours later, Raphael was in the private office of Dr. Richard Evans, the doctor who had accompanied his father during his terminal illness. The man, now with completely grey hair, received him with an expression of curiosity. 20 years have passed, Raphael. What could be so important about your father now? Raphael went straight to the point. Doctor, I want to know about his last months in the hospital, specifically about a nurse named Mary Olsen and her young daughter. The doctor seemed momentarily surprised, then his expression softened with recognition. Ah, little Beatrice. I remember her well. An extraordinary child, intelligent, compassionate, far beyond her age. Your father developed a special bond with her. What kind of bond? Raphael pressed. Dr. Evans clasped his fingers on the table, thoughtful. Your father was dying, Raphael. And like many men in his situation, he began to reflect on his life, his choices, his regrets. Beatrice's presence seemed to bring him a peace that nothing else could. He said she reminded him of the purity that exists before the world corrupts us with ambition and pride. That doesn't sound like the Anthony Aldridge I knew, the doctor smiled. Sadly, the proximity of death changes people. Your father was a ruthless man in business, that's true. But in his last weeks, I saw in him a genuine desire for redemption, to repair past mistakes. What mistakes? Dr. Evans hesitated. It's not my place to discuss patient confidences even after so long, but I can tell you that your father expressed deep regret for decisions that affected innocent people. He saw in Beatrice an opportunity to do something genuinely good, perhaps the last chance before the end. Raphael left the office with more questions than answers. In his car, before starting the engine, he checked the Manor's cameras via his tablet. Gabriel was taking his afternoon nap, and Beatrice was silently organizing toys in his room. Her face held a thoughtful, almost melancholic expression. Back at the Manor, Raphael went straight to his office and re-examined the hospital records Paul had obtained. There were daily notes made by Mary Olsen about Anthony's condition. many mentioning Beatrice's presence and how it seemed to calm the patient. One entry in particular caught his attention, dated a week before his father's passing. Patient agitated after son's visit, insisted on speaking with the girl alone for 20 minutes. Afterward, requested his lawyer be called urgently. Expressed concern about setting things right while there's still time. Raphael frowned. He vaguely remembered that visit, a heated discussion about a business acquisition his father wanted to reverse, something Raphael considered a sentimental error from a man weakened by illness. He had left the hospital furious without looking back, and the lawyer, Arnold Vincent, who had handled the family's legal affairs for decades until his own passing 5 years ago. Could he have been the repository of some secret of Anthony Aldridge? Of some reparation action his father had planned in his last days, Raphael felt a growing urgency to discover the whole truth. It was no longer just about who Beatrice was or why she had approached his family. It was about what his own father might have done that needed reparation. That night, while they dined, Raphael decided to change tactics. Instead of pressing Beatrice directly, he opted for a softer approach. "You know, I've been thinking about our last meeting," he commented as he poured himself wine. "I'd like to hear more about your memories of my father. I have the impression that in his last days, he showed you a side that few knew." Beatrice seemed surprised by the change in tone. After a moment of hesitation, her face softened. "He used to tell me stories," she began, her voice taking on a nostalgic tone. "Not children's stories, but about his own life. About how he started from nothing and built his empire. About places he visited, people he met. He said I was a good listener. My father was never much for sharing stories with me," Raphael admitted, feeling an unexpected pang of envy. "He spoke of you," Beatrice said softly. "He said he was very proud of the man you had become, even if he didn't know how to show it." Raphael felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. His father had never expressed such a sentiment in life. "And what else did you talk about?" Beatrice played with the food on her plate, thoughtful. "He asked me about school, about what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I said I'd like to care for children, he smiled and said I'd be excellent at it. He said I had a gift for seeing people beyond appearances." Gabriel, sitting in his high chair, banged on the table with his spoon, demanding attention. Beatrice immediately turned to him, helping him with dinner. Raphael observed the interaction, noting once again the special bond between the two. "One thing intrigues me," he said after a moment. "How did you manage to connect so quickly with Gabriel? He rejected all other nannies, but with you it was different from the first day." Beatrice's smile wavered almost imperceptibly. Children sense when someone genuinely cares. "There's no special technique, just patience, respect and sincere love. Even so, it's almost as if you already knew each other." Beatrice's eyes met Raphael's for a tense instant, then shifted to Gabriel. "Perhaps in another life," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. After dinner, when Gabriel was already in bed and Beatrice had retired to her room, Raphael returned to the office to check the day's recordings again. He watched each interaction between Beatrice and Gabriel with renewed attention, searching for clues, signs, anything that could clarify the mystery. It was then that he noticed something he had overlooked before. During a game on the living room rug, Gabriel accidentally knocked over a picture frame. Beatrice quickly picked it up, but before putting it back on the shelf, she spent a few seconds looking at the photograph, an image of Louisa, Raphael's deceased wife, pregnant with Gabriel. The expression on Beatrice's face at that moment was one of pure pain, not the polite sympathy of a stranger seeing a photo of someone who had passed, but something deeper, more personal, as if the image evoked a painful memory of her own. Raphael rewound the tape several times, studying that expression. What could cause such a reaction? What connection could Beatrice have with Louisa, a woman who, as far as he knew, she had never met? Then a disturbing thought began to form in his mind. What if the connection wasn't with Louisa, but with Gabriel? What if the instantaneous bond between the nanny and the boy wasn't coincidence or professional skill, but something much deeper? As these questions swirled in his mind, Raphael noticed movement on one of the monitors. Beatrice had left her room again in the middle of the night, as she had before. This time, however, she did not go to Gabriel's room. but to the Manners Library. Raphael watched, intrigued, as she lit only the small lamp on the central table and began to examine the shelves, as if searching for something specific. After a few minutes, she pulled out a thick book, a photo album, Raphael realized. Beatrice sat under the dim light and began to slowly leaf through the album. From where he was, Raphael couldn't see the images, but her expression changed with each page. Surprise, recognition, sadness, and finally, something that looked like determination. She stopped on a specific page, her fingers tracing the outline of a photograph. A single tear ran down her face as she whispered something the cameras didn't pick up. Then carefully she put the album exactly where she had found it and left the library. Raphael waited a few minutes after she returned to her room, then descended silently to the library. He lit the same lamp and looked for the album Beatrice had been examining. It was one of the oldest, containing photographs from when his father still ran the company, before Raphael took control. He opened the book and began to leaf through it, trying to guess which image had provoked that emotional reaction in Beatrice. He stopped when he came to a particular photograph, the inauguration of a children's wing at St. Luke's Hospital, sponsored by Aldridge Industries. In the photo, his father cut the inaugural ribbon, surrounded by officials, doctors, and nurses. And there, almost at the edge of the group, partially visible, was a young nurse holding hands with a small girl in a red dress. The child's face was partially obscured, but there was no doubt it was Beatrice, about 5 years old, next to her mother, Mary Olson. Raphael felt a shiver. The connection between his family and Beatrice was older and deeper than he had imagined. It wasn't just the casual encounter between an elderly patient and a visiting child. His father had funded the wing where Mary Olson worked, possibly knowing her long before being admitted as a patient. He continued examining the album, now with renewed attention. A few pages later, he found another photograph that made him freeze, his father at a hospital charity event, and again Mary Olson appeared among the honored employees. This time there was no sign of Beatrice, but the date in the corner of the photo was revealing, 3 years before Gabriel's birth. Raphael closed the album, his mind buzzing. His father's visits to the hospital didn't begin with his terminal illness. He already had previous connections with the institution, with the department where Mary Olson worked. And now, almost 20 years later, her daughter had appeared in his life, forming an instant and inexplicable bond with his son. The mystery only deepened, and Raphael felt he was about to discover a truth that could change everything he believed he knew about his family. The next morning brought a clear decision for Raphael. It was time to get definitive answers, no longer fragments of partial truths or unsettling coincidences. As he watched Beatrice prepare breakfast for Gabriel, softly humming a lullaby, the same one his own mother used to sing to him as a child, he felt an urgency he could no longer ignore. After taking Gabriel to play in the garden, Beatrice was surprised by the sound of the intercom. Sylvia, the housekeeper, came to inform her that an elderly lady had arrived and was urgently asking to see her. Raphael, who was monitoring everything from his office, saw Beatrice's face pale. She quickly asked Sylvia to stay with Gabriel for a few minutes and went to the Manners entrance. Raphael switched to the main door camera, anxious to see who the unexpected visitor was. A woman of approximately 60, with grey hair tied in a simple bun and an upright posture despite her age, waited in the entrance hall. When Beatrice appeared, the woman opened her arms and the two embraced for a long time. "Mother, what are you doing here?" Beatrice asked, her voice trembling with concern. "Did something happen?" "I needed to see you, daughter," Mary Olson replied, holding Beatrice's hands in hers. "After our last conversation, I couldn't sleep properly. I'm afraid we're making a mistake. This isn't the time or place." "Mother," Beatrice cast a nervous glance around, as if fearing being observed, which, in fact, she was. "It's exactly the time," Mary insisted. "We've kept this secret for too long. He deserves to know the truth." Raphael felt his heart race. What truth were they talking about? What did he deserve to know? "Let's talk outside," Beatrice suggested, guiding her mother to the garden. Raphael quickly switched to the outdoor cameras, but the two women had moved beyond the reach of the microphones. He could only see them talking intensely, Mary gesturing emphatically, while Beatrice seemed increasingly distressed. At one point, Beatrice brought her hands to her face, as if trying to hold back tears. Mary hugged her again, saying something in her ear. Then the two looked towards the manor with determined expressions. Raphael turned off the monitors and leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. Whatever truth they held, it seemed the moment of revelation had arrived. He mentally prepared for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. He didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, a soft knock sounded on his office door. "Enter," he said, keeping his voice firm despite the anxiety he felt. Beatrice opened the door, followed by her mother. The young woman's face showed signs that she had been crying, but her eyes now reflected a quiet resolve. "Mr. Aldridge, this is my mother, Mary Olson. We need to talk to you about something important." Raphael indicated the chairs in front of him. "Please sit down. I have a feeling this conversation is long overdue." Mary Olson studied Raphael intently before speaking, as if memorizing every detail of his face. "You look like your father," she finally commented. "You have the same keen eyes. Anthony always managed to see through people." "You knew my father well," Raphael stated. "It wasn't a question." "Better than most, I'd say," Mary replied with a melancholic smile. "I was his nurse for many years, not just during his final illness. He suffered from chronic hypertension and came to the hospital regularly for checkups. That's how we met long before he was admitted for the last time." Raphael nodded, beginning to understand the extent of the connection. "And during that time, your daughter also knew him." "Beatrice and your father developed a special bond," Mary confirmed. "Initially, they were just occasional meetings. Beatrice sometimes accompanied me to the hospital when she didn't have school. But after the terminal diagnosis, when he started staying in the hospital for longer periods, their friendship truly blossomed." "He gave me the locket," Beatrice interjected, touching the object over her dress. "He said it was a symbol of protection that had passed through generations in the Aldridge family, that I should keep it until it was time to pass it on." Raphael frowned. That locket belonged to his pocket watch. It wasn't just any object. It was practically a family heirloom. Why would he give something so significant to a child he barely knew? Mary and Beatrice exchanged glances, as if silently deciding who should continue. It was Mary who finally spoke. "Your father changed a lot in the last months of his life, Mr. Aldridge. The imminence of death has that effect on people. It makes them reevaluate their choices, their values. Anthony began to talk about regrets, about paths not taken." "What kind of regrets?" Raphael pressed. Again, that exchange of glances between mother and daughter. This time it was Beatrice who answered. About decisions that affected innocent lives. Decisions he made thinking he was protecting the family legacy, but which ended up causing unnecessary suffering. Raphael felt a chill down his spine. He was getting closer to a revelation he feared. "And what does that have to do with you being here now caring for my son?" Beatrice took a deep breath, like someone gathering courage to take a leap into the unknown. 2 years ago, I was working as a nursing assistant at London Maternity Hospital. It was a coincidence. I didn't know your wife would give birth there." Raphael stiffened, the mention of Louisa bringing a familiar pain. "You met my wife?" "Yes, I was one of the assistants who helped with Gabriel's birth." The information hit Raphael like lightning. Beatrice had been present at his son's birth. It wasn't just a connection to his father, but also to the most significant moment of his family life. "Why did you never mention it?" he asked, his voice tense. "Because that wasn't all I needed to tell," Beatrice replied, her voice now almost a whisper. "There's something else, something that happened that night. Something that changed everything." Mary placed her hand on her daughter's arm, giving her silent support. Beatrice continued, each word seeming an immense effort. "There was a complication during labor. Your wife had a severe hemorrhage, and the doctors were focused on saving her. That same night, another woman also gave birth, a boy who was stillborn." Raphael felt his blood run cold. Where was she going with that story? "In the confusion to save your wife, there was a swap," Beatrice continued, her eyes now watery. "It wasn't accidental. It was an order." "What are you saying?" Raphael asked, his voice trembling, already fearing the answer. "I'm saying that the baby who was stillborn was not the other woman's child. It was Louisa's child. Your biological child." Raphael felt as if the world had stopped. Beatrice's words echoed in his mind, incomprehensible in their horror. "That's absurd," he finally managed to say, standing up abruptly. "Why would you invent such a cruel lie? Is that what my father taught you to do?" "It's not a lie," Mary interjected in a firm voice. "My daughter was there. She saw what happened. She saw when Dr. Blackwood received a phone call, and minutes later gave the order for the swap. The live baby was taken to another room," declared the other patient's child. "The baby who didn't survive was presented to you as your son." Raphael staggered, leaning on the table to keep from falling. The room seemed to spin around him. "Are you telling me that Gabriel, that the boy I've raised for 2 years, is not my son?" "That's not what we're saying," Beatrice replied quickly. "Gabriel is your son, yes, but there was a swap that night." Raphael stared at her, confused. "You just said my biological son didn't survive." "The baby who died was Louisa's son, yes," Beatrice explained patiently. "But he wasn't your biological son, Mr. Aldridge." The impact of the revelation made Raphael sit down again. "What are you implying?" Mary intervened again, her voice now gentle. "There are things about your father that you don't know, Raphael. Anthony was a complex man, capable of gestures of great kindness, and also terrible decisions when he believed he was protecting the family." "What does my father have to do with this?" Raphael asked, his head still spinning. "Your father never approved of your marriage to Louisa," Mary continued. "He considered her unsuitable for the Aldridge family, a nurse of humble origin, without connections or fortune. When she became pregnant, his displeasure only increased. That's not new. He made his disapproval clear. But to interfere with the birth of his own grandson, it wasn't just interference," Beatrice said, her voice trembling. "It was a carefully orchestrated conspiracy. Your father bribed Dr. Blackwood to ensure that no impure blood would continue the Aldridge lineage." Raphael closed his eyes, trying to process the horror of what he was hearing. His father, however cold and calculating, would he be capable of something so monstrous? Of manipulating births and endangering innocent lives, just to maintain the supposed purity of a family lineage? "If what you say is true, then who is Gabriel?" he finally asked, opening his eyes to face Beatrice. "Gabriel is your biological son," she replied. "The son born that night to the other woman. The healthy baby who was swapped and given to another family." "But you just said Gabriel is the boy I'm raising." "Yes," Beatrice confirmed, "because I brought him back." Raphael stared at her, astonished. "What are you saying?" "When I realized what had happened, I was horrified. I couldn't stay silent. I confronted Dr. Blackwood. He confessed that he had received a direct order from your father, through the old butler, George Sanders, an order to ensure that Louisa's son, whom your father suspected was not yours, would not be raised as an Aldridge." Raphael suddenly remembered George's strange behavior in the days following Gabriel's birth. The man had unexpectedly resigned, claiming health problems, and disappeared without a trace. "After that night, I requested a transfer to the city care home," Beatrice continued. "It was there that I found your true son, the baby who had been swapped. His mother, the other woman who gave birth that night, did not survive labor, and the baby, your biological son, was sent for adoption. But before any adoption process began, I took him home with me." "You kidnapped a child?" Raphael asked, horrified. "I saved your son," Beatrice corrected firmly. "So I knew it was wrong, illegal even, but I also knew it was the only chance to right the wrong that had been done. I took the baby home and with my mother's help cared for him as if he were my own child. For almost 2 years," Mary added. "During that time, we constantly researched you, your family. We knew we needed to find a way to return the boy to his true father, but without causing a scandal that would destroy many lives. When we learned of Louisa's accident," Beatrice continued, "we were devastated, not just by the tragedy itself, but because it complicated the situation even further. How to explain the swap now that she was gone? We continued watching from afar, waiting for the right moment. Then we saw the advertisement looking for a nanny for your house. It was the perfect opportunity, a way to bring Gabriel back to his true home without raising immediate suspicions." Raphael looked at his sleeping son, then at the 2 women who had altered the course of his life in ways he could never have imagined. "You risked everything, your careers, your freedom, to correct a mistake you didn't commit. Why?" It was Mary who answered, with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand the complexities of the human heart. Because there are injustices we simply cannot ignore. Because every child deserves to know their true origin. And because perhaps I felt I owed it to Anthony to fix at least some of the many mistakes he made in life. Raphael felt hot tears streaming down his face. He hugged Gabriel tighter, amazed by the improbable miracle that had brought him back. "How can I be absolutely sure?" he finally asked. "How can I know without a shadow of a doubt that this is the truth?" "DNA test," Beatrice suggested promptly. "It's your right to want that confirmation. We are prepared for it. But even without the test, look at him," Mary added softly. "Really look. Don't you see yourself in him? Don't you feel the connection that always seemed to be missing before?" Raphael looked at Gabriel's sleeping face. It was true. Since Beatrice's arrival, the boy had transformed, as if he finally felt at home. The connection he had always hoped to have with his son, and which he had never been able to fully develop before, now flourished naturally. "There's something else you should see," Beatrice said, standing up and going to her bag. From it she took out a small photo album. "These are photos of Gabriel during the months he was with us. I thought you might like to see what his first months were like." Raphael took the album with trembling hands. On the first page, a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket looked at the camera with attentive eyes, the same eyes he now knew so well. On the following pages, documented with the care of a loving mother, was Gabriel's first year of life, his first smile, his first tooth, his first attempts to crawl. A lifetime of moments Raphael had missed, captured and preserved by a stranger who now revealed herself to be much more. "You love him," he said, not as a question but as a statement, as if he were our own. Beatrice confirmed, her eyes overflowing with emotion. "But we always knew he was yours. Every photograph, every recorded milestone, was made with the thought of the day we could hand this album to you." Raphael closed the album, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "I'll do the DNA test for formality, but in my heart I already know the truth. Gabriel is my son, my blood son. And you? You are the family he knew first, the family that loved and protected him when I didn't even know he existed." He stood up carefully, still holding the sleeping Gabriel. "I don't know yet how to process all this. My father's betrayal, the manipulation, the pain he caused so many people. But I know one thing for sure. I cannot separate Gabriel from you two again. It would be too cruel for all of us." Beatrice and Mary looked at him with cautious hope. "What are you saying, Mr. Aldridge?" Beatrice asked. "I'm saying that regardless of the test results, you are welcome in our lives, in Gabriel's life. Not as employees, but as family." The words felt strange in his mouth, but at the same time profoundly right. The family he had always known had been built on lies and manipulations. Perhaps it was time to build something new based on truth, however painful it might be. "There are still many issues to resolve, many wounds to heal," he continued. "But for now I think we all need to rest." It was an extraordinary day. Mary stood up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You are a better man than your father, Raphael. He would have denied everything, thrown us out, perhaps even threatened us. But you chose to listen, to understand. There is hope for the Aldridges after all." She approached and, with the naturalness of someone who had made the gesture thousands of times, kissed Gabriel's forehead. "Good night, my little prince. Tomorrow will be a new day." Raphael watched as Mary left the room, leaving him alone with Beatrice and Gabriel. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of silence that exists only between people who share a deep bond. "Thank you," he finally said, looking at Beatrice with new eyes, "for bringing him back to me." Beatrice smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated her entire face. "I always knew this moment would come. From the first day, when I held Gabriel in my arms for the first time, I knew that one day I would take him back to his true home. I just didn't imagine that I would also find a place to call my own on this journey." Raphael nodded, understanding the depth of what she was saying. In a single day, his world had been turned upside down, but somehow it felt more right, more aligned than it had ever been. "You mentioned that my father said something about the locket," he remembered, "that you should keep it until it was time to pass it on. What do you think he meant?" Beatrice touched the locket over her dress. her eyes distant with the memory. His exact words were, "Keep it until you find the true heir, one who carries the Aldridge blood without carrying its sins." At the time I didn't understand. Now I know he was talking about Gabriel. Raphael felt a chill run down his spine. His father, even in his last moments, already knew what he had done, and in his distorted way, had tried to create a path to redemption. "Tomorrow," he said, gently placing Gabriel in the crib, "we will begin. To unravel the rest of this story, there are still many pieces missing from the puzzle, and we'll be here," Beatrice promised, "to help you find them." As they left the room together, Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his crib, Raphael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Hope that despite the lies and betrayals that had shaped his past, the future could still be built on a foundation of truth and love. 3 weeks had passed since the revelations that transformed Raphael Aldridge's life. Aldridge Manor, once a cold and silent environment, now vibrated with new energy. Gabriel's laughter echoed through the corridors, mingling with the voices of Beatrice and Mary, who had stayed at Raphael's request while they reorganized their lives. On that sunny Sunday morning, Raphael watched from the terrace as Beatrice and Gabriel played in the garden. The boy, now fully blossomed in his personality, ran across the lawn chasing soap bubbles that Beatrice blew into the air. His crystalline laugh was the most precious sound Raphael had ever heard. "He's happy," Mary commented, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. She offered one to Raphael, who accepted with a grateful smile. "I've never seen him so radiant." "Neither have I," Raphael agreed, his eyes fixed on his son. "It's as if he's finally home." And it was true. Since the truth came out, Gabriel had transformed. The boy, once reserved and distant, now overflowed with joy and curiosity, forming increasingly strong bonds not only with Beatrice and Mary, but also with Raphael. For the first time, father and son genuinely connected, discovering similarities and sharing moments Raphael had never imagined possible. The DNA test, discreetly performed by a trusted laboratory, only confirmed what Raphael's heart already knew. Gabriel was, without a shadow of a doubt, his biological son. Science had proven what destiny through Beatrice's hands had restored. "What will you do now?" Mary asked, her wise eyes studying Raphael's profile. "About the whole truth, I mean." Raphael sighed, taking a sip of coffee before answering. "I'm still processing. Part of me wants to expose everything. The conspiracy, the manipulation, my father's cruelty. Dr. Blackwood is still out there, probably making the same kind of shady deals with other powerful families. And the other part? The other part thinks about Gabriel, about how this exposure would affect his life. He has already lost so much. The biological mother he never knew, the first months with his true father. I don't want him to grow up under the shadow of a public scandal." Mary nodded understandingly. "It's a difficult decision. Justice and protection don't always go hand in hand." "I'll find a middle ground," Raphael said with determination. "Dr. Blackwood will face consequences, even if discreetly. And as for the records, they will be corrected. Gabriel deserves to know his true story when he's older." They watched in silence as Beatrice now helped Gabriel pick flowers for a small bouquet. The scene was of touching simplicity, not the nanny and her little charge, but something much deeper and more significant. "She loves him like a mother," Mary commented softly. From the very first moment when she brought him home, something special formed between them, a bond that transcends explanations. "I noticed," Raphael admitted. "That's why I made a decision. In fact, several decisions." Mary raised a curious eyebrow. "Beatrice will stay," he continued, "not as a nanny, but as family. Gabriel sees her as a mother, and it would be cruel to separate the two now. Besides—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I believe we have an opportunity here, a chance to build something new from the ruins of so many lies." "And me?" Mary asked with a slight smile. "You too, of course. This house is too big for just 3 people, and Gabriel loves his grandma Mary. But there's something else I'd like to discuss with you." Raphael took a deep breath before continuing. "You mentioned there was a story between you and my father. A story of forbidden love, interrupted by social conventions and his pride. I'd like to hear it when you're ready to share." Mary's eyes shone with old memories. a mixture of joy and pain that only time could bestow. Anthony and I met when he was still building his empire, she began, her voice soft with nostalgia. I was a young nurse, he an ambitious businessman. Her casual encounter at the hospital, where he was visiting a sick partner, sparked something unexpected for both of us. We had a brief but intense romance. Anthony, however, came from a traditional family, with rigid expectations. When he discovered I was pregnant, he panicked. His father, your grandfather, had threatened to disinherit him if he stained the Aldridge name with an unsuitable union. Raphael felt a tightness in his chest. You were pregnant with my father's child. Mary nodded, her eyes now moist. Anthony chose the company and the family inheritance over us. He offered me money to solve the problem and disappear. I refused the abortion, but accepted enough to start over in another city, away from the judgment and shame a single mother would face. So, Beatrice is your half-sister, yes. Daughter of the same father, born almost 20 years before you. The revelation, though half-suspected, hit Raphael with full force. Beatrice, the mysterious nanny who had entered his life so abruptly, was in fact his own sister. A sister his father had recognized at the end of his life, when illness and the proximity of death brought a rare moment of moral clarity. That explains the locket, Raphael murmured. He recognized her as an Aldridge, even if belatedly. Yes, but never officially, Mary explained. The locket was his symbolic gesture, his silent plea for forgiveness. Anthony knew he was dying, and regrets weighed more than any fortune or reputation. And Beatrice? Does she know she's my sister? Yes, I told her when she turned 18. It was a shock, of course, but it helped explain why we grew up with so little, while your father lived in luxury. Still, she never held a grudge. She said that everyone has their own demons to face. Raphael looked again at the garden, where Beatrice now sat Gabriel on her lap to show him a small beetle that had landed on a flower. His sister, Gabriel's biological aunt, the family he never knew he had. When the baby swap scandal happened, Mary continued, Beatrice saw an opportunity not only to correct an injustice, but also to finally meet the brother she was never allowed to find, you. And she risked everything, her career, her freedom, for that. For that and for Gabriel. She knew what it was like to grow up, without knowing part of your true family. She didn't want Gabriel to go through the same. Raphael remained silent for long moments, absorbing the magnitude of all he had learned. His father, the man he had always seen as a model of righteousness in business, had abandoned a pregnant woman, denied a daughter, and orchestrated a baby swap out of pure family pride. And yet in the end he had tried in his distorted way to mend at least some of the harm he had caused. I will recognize her, he finally said, his voice firm with determination. Legally, Beatrice is an Aldridge, always has been. It's time the world knew it, Mary smiled, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. You are the man your father should have been. Raphael. Before he could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps and laughter approached. Beatrice came up the terrace steps with Gabriel in her arms, both flushed from playing in the sun. Look what we found, Daddy, Gabriel exclaimed, holding out a small bouquet of wildflowers. For you. Raphael took the flowers with an exaggerated bow that made the boy laugh even more. These are the most beautiful flowers I've ever received. Thank you, son. Beatrice helped, Gabriel proudly informed him. She knows all about flowers. She knows many things, Raphael agreed, exchanging a meaningful glance with Beatrice. And we have a lot to learn from her. Beatrice blushed slightly, realizing that something important had been discussed before her arrival. Mary stood up, extending her arms to Gabriel. Shall we wash those little hands for lunch? I think your father and Beatrice need to talk a little bit. When they were alone on the terrace, an expectant silence hung between them. Beatrice nervously adjusted the locket that, as always, hung from her neck. Your mother told me, Raphael finally said. About you, about my father. About us. Beatrice nodded, her eyes revealing vulnerability. I wanted to tell you sooner, but there were so many layers of secrets, so many wounds to expose. I was afraid it would be too much at once. And it was. Still is. Raphael took a step towards her. But I'm grateful to know. Grateful to finally understand who we are to each other. Does this change your plans? She asked hesitantly. About us staying? Raphael smiled, for the first time feeling certain that he was taking the right path. It changes only one thing. Now I know I'm not just offering a home to my son's nanny. I'm reuniting a family that should never have been separated. You are my sister, Beatrice. And Aldridge, her eyes filled with tears. I never expected this, she confessed. When I brought Gabriel back, my only goal was to correct the injustice against him, against you. I never imagined I would find my own place in this family. Destiny has surprising ways of correcting its own paths, Raphael said, repeating the words she herself had used weeks earlier. And I think it's time we made it official. He extended his hand, holding the locket that hung from her neck. My father gave this to you as a symbol of protection and belonging. Now I want you to wear it with pride, not as a secret, but as proof of who you truly are, Beatrice Aldridge. Tears now streamed freely down her face. With trembling hands, Beatrice unclasped the chain and placed the locket in Raphael's palm. Perhaps it's time to pass it on, as your father suggested, she said softly. Raphael looked at the family symbol, the circle with the small star in the center, and understood what she meant. To Gabriel, he agreed. The true heir, one who carries the Aldridge blood without carrying its sins. Exactly. That afternoon, as they lunched together for the first time, as the strange but harmonious family they had become, Raphael observed the people around the table. Mary, the woman his father had loved and abandoned, Beatrice, the sister who had grown up without knowing her true lineage, and Gabriel, the son whom destiny had returned through tortuous paths, a family built not on titles or expectations, but on painful truths finally brought to light. A family that chose to forgive without forgetting, to move forward without denying the past. After lunch, while Gabriel took his nap, Raphael took Beatrice and Mary to his office. From a locked drawer, he pulled out a folder of documents. I've already spoken with my lawyer, he announced. These are the papers for Beatrice's legal recognition as my sister and Anthony Aldridge's daughter. And these, he pulled out another set of documents, ensure that both Beatrice and Mary receive their fair share of the family inheritance. Beatrice's eyes widened. Raphael, it's not necessary. We never wanted the Aldridge money. It's not just money, he explained. It's justice. It's recognizing that my father made mistakes that need to be rectified. Furthermore, as a major shareholder of Aldridge Industries, you can help transform the company's legacy. Together we can create something we can truly be proud of. The dream began to take shape at that moment, a vision of how the Aldridge wealth and power could be redirected for good, to heal instead of cause harm. In the weeks and months that followed, profound changes occurred in everyone's lives. The manor was redesigned, previously cold and formal spaces transformed into welcoming environments for a growing family. Mary brought plants and colors, Beatrice filled the walls with photographs and memories, and Gabriel filled every corner with his energy and joy. Raphael reorganized the company's priorities, establishing a foundation to support single mothers and vulnerable children, a silent tribute to Helen Campbell, the woman who gave birth to his biological son and who never had the chance to know him. Dr. Blackwood was discreetly removed from his position at the hospital, and records were corrected to reflect the truth about Gabriel's birth. On a quiet afternoon, 6 months after the revelations that had changed everything, Raphael, Beatrice, Mary, and Gabriel together visited Anthony Aldridge's grave. It was the first time they went as a united family, the family Anthony could have had. Had he made different choices? Gabriel, now talkative and curious, looked with interest at the marble headstone. Who was he, Daddy? Raphael exchanged a glance with Beatrice and Mary before answering. He was your grandfather, Gabriel. A complicated man who made mistakes, but who in the end tried to fix them in his own way. Beatrice knelt beside the boy, adjusting the locket that now hung from his neck, the symbol that had passed from Anthony to her and now to Gabriel, completing the circle that destiny had drawn. Your grandfather once told me that a man's greatest strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up after every fall, she recounted. I think in the end he understood that. Mary placed a small bouquet of flowers on the grave, her eyes reflecting not resentment, but a serene acceptance of the complexities of the human heart. Rest in peace, Anthony, she murmured. Your family is united now. Your legacy is in good hands. Raphael observed the scene with a mixture of emotions. There was still anger, yes, for Mary's abandonment, for the denial of Beatrice as his daughter, for the cruel manipulation that almost cost his own grandson's life. But there was also understanding. His father had been a product of his time, his upbringing, his own fears and insecurities. "Let's go home," he finally said, extending his hand to Gabriel. The boy looked one last time at the headstone, then took his father's hand, smiling. "Can we get ice cream on the way?" The innocent question brought smiles to everyone, dissipating the solemnity of the moment. Life continued, with its small daily joys and discoveries, overlaying the pains of the past. On the way back, as Gabriel excitedly talked about the ice cream flavors he intended to try, Raphael looked in the rearview mirror at Beatrice and Mary in the back seat. His sister and his... What was Mary to him now? Stepmother? Friend? Confidante? Perhaps all those things, and some more that didn't yet have names. Family, he decided. Simply family, that powerful and comforting word that had gained a new meaning in his life. Upon arriving at the manor, they found the garden table set for an afternoon snack. Sylvia, who had remained with them after all the revelations, had arranged everything with the affection of someone who served not just employers, but people she genuinely appreciated. Sitting under the late afternoon blue sky, savoring cakes and juices, they looked like any other family, united by ties of blood and choice, by painful truths transformed into new beginnings. Gabriel, with the family locket shining in the sun, ran around the table chasing a butterfly. His laughter, pure and carefree, was living proof that even from the cruelest lies, truth eventually found its way to the light. Raphael watched his son, his true son, return to him through paths he could never have imagined, and felt a deep gratitude for the two women who had transformed his life. Mary, who had carried his father's secret for decades, and Beatrice, who had risked everything to reunite the scattered pieces of the Aldridge family. The locket that Gabriel now wore was no longer just a symbol of a proud lineage, but of redemption and renewal, the promise that the mistakes of one generation did not have to become the destiny of the next. And as the sun began to set, casting golden shadows over the garden, Raphael knew with certainty that they had all found the place where they truly belonged. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Raphael, Beatrice, and little Gabriel has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore family bonds, past secrets, and the strength of true love. Find it right here by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this narrative of redemption and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the transformative power of truth. Share in the comments which moment touched you the most on this journey of the Aldridge family. We look forward to reading your impressions, and we'll see you in the next story.